Welcome to the DMF. I'm Justin Younts. This is all the parts together. Welcome to the DMF. I am Justin Younts, and I have my guest here, Albert Bramante. He is an agent. He has written a book, and we are going to get into so many different things. How are you doing, Albert?
I'm doing well, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the DMF. I really appreciate it. So, my first question is, where are you from?
hmm I live in New Jersey and I work in New York City, so I'm in the East Coast.
Cool, cool. What got you into the arts?
What got me into the arts was I was always fascinated with the arts. I mean, I was in drama club in high school. When during my undergrad college, I took some theater classes, some acting electives, and it was really fascinating for me. And then I dabbled a little bit into acting,
Mm,
and realized it wasn't for me, but I loved being around actors. I loved being change really. For me, that was much more important than necessarily being an actor, but being around them. And that was in the early 2000s.
Was there a certain thing that kind of like was this epiphany that said, "Oh, this just isn't for me."
Well, it was just that I found myself rooting for other actors, which is great,
Yeah.
and even recommending actors for certain things.
Mm, interesting.
And as a matter of fact, someone had pointed out to me, you should be an agent. And I was like, oh, okay. Um, so once I realized it wasn't really for me, but I loved actors. So I started doing behind the scenes work, casting here and there. I would help filmmakers cast their film. I would I worked at film festivals a little bit, did some planning and behind the scenes work in film festivals, and just realized each time I would do that, I'd meet a lot of actors, and I realized how much I felt so at home with them.
Yeah.
And so in 2004, I said, I really want to start my first company. That's where Emerging Talent LLC, which is my first agency, was born.
So when you were deciding to, create your own agency, were you reluctant at first? Did you like what? How did you go about that?
Well, I was a little reluctant. I was a little anxious, a little apprehensive. But
Yeah.
what I did was I just went for it.
Yeah.
Um, and with the notion I'm going to give this a shot. The mentality I had at that time was, if it works, great. If not, at least I can say I tried something.
Yeah.
And it was slow. It was a slow start, but it really started, you know, really reinforcing the idea that this is the right path for me.
So how did Bramante artist come about?
So, well, that took a while. I mean, for years,
Mm,
I had the emerging name and the brand, and that was great, But I started to think like, okay, well, my clients aren't really emerging anymore. Most
yeah.
of them are established. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay. And most agents start with their name, use their name in their. So I was like, well, that's where Bravante came in. And for a while, I was playing around with that. And then during the pandemic, right before well, I should say right before the pandemic, I started collaborating with a commercial agent because at that time I was just really handling theatrical actors,
Mm,
and I wanted to get into commercials, and so I teamed up with a commercial agent, with Bonafide, and then artists, and then what happened was in early 2020, January of early 2021, we merged, so it became Bonafide and Emerging Artists.
mm,
So it wasn't that we just gave up our company, we just combined them. And
mm.
then we had the writer's strike happening in 2023, and the SAG after strike, which really slowed things down, you know, for me, almost to a standstill. And, I'm not going to get it, I don't want to get into too much, but the partnership wasn't working out, you know,
Okay.
for both of us. And so I was like, okay, I could go back to emerging, but I was like, I really, was for seriously considering Vermonte artists before the merger came, was presented to me. So I said that's where Bramante Artist is going to come in. And so January 1st, 2024 was when Bramante Artist launched.
Interesting. So that's cool. That's a so just, you're like, okay, it's time to move away. Let's, do this, mutual move
Very
away.
mutual, yeah, very mutual. Good terms, and yeah, it was a great experience too. I really enjoyed myself when I was a big artist, and bona fide. So, but now it was like for me, it was like time for a change, and I wanted to rebrand, and that's what I did. Um, I've been doing that for almost, yeah, about 16 months now.
So also finding out through your book, you are also a skilled hypnotist as well as an NLP, neuro linguistic programming.
Yeah, I have some training in that. So,
Mm.
and I incorporated a little bit of that in the book too.
How did that come about? How did you get interested in that?
Well, I was always interested in the mind. I mean, I heard a little bit of hypnosis in grad school, and I was just, and then I even saw a couple of stage shows where I watched, and I was really intrigued by the process. So I took some, initially online seminars just to learn about it. I was like, this is something I really like. I mean, it was getting sometimes to root causes of things. Um, and then through my hypnosis training, I found out NLP, and it was what was interesting a lot about this work was I was employing it without even realizing it beforehand.
Hmm.
So that's what kind of really got me more interested, and I just took several classes and just became a student of that, and really started studying that in detail.
Because your degree is in philosophy.
No, psychology.
It is? Okay. Does it
Yes,
said
well, it's a doctor of philosophy in psychology. So
okay,
that's a
okay. So I
yeah,
read it
that
wrong.
because that's a
Okay.
PhD. Yeah.
Okay, cool, cool. And you went to Walden, correct?
Yes.
Was so now I think we're gonna get into the book, which your book is Rise Above the Script, Confronting Self-Doubt and Mastering
hmm
Self-Sabotage for Performing Artists. How long was this book in the making?
It was practically, I would say, if several years in the making, maybe 7, 8 years. Um, a lot of push pull, a lot of starting and stopping. So initially, the premise of the book was my doctoral dissertation.
Mm,
When I went to Walden. So, just to give you the backstory with that, when I first started, emerging talent in the mid 2000s, I was noticing something that kept running up against was a disconnect with actors, where they were telling me how much they wanted to work and how hungry they were for work. But every time an audition came up, there was always an excuse. There was always and this, or they couldn't go, or they didn't prepare, or they were late.
mm,
And this kept happening, and I, was getting frustrated. Like, why is this happening?
yeah.
And so when I first started my Walden journey, we took we had to get orientation for the dissertation, and I said, well, let me pose this question: why do actors self-sabotage? And they approved it. They liked it. So that was pretty much my doctoral dissertation.
So that's kind of where it started,
Yes.
was that approach. Because as you tell that story in the book about, I think it was a girl, I don't another actor who just, couldn't do it, couldn't make the audition, and then she or he was completely out of the business afterwards. And
Yeah.
when I read that, I wonder is that subconscious thinking that is happening there? Is that something that they can't control?
I mean, I would think that. Unfortunately, I really couldn't ask that. But it was like,
Mm,
this particular actor, this really was probably the biggest one. I mean, I have other examples, but this one, I remember she had it was for Nick, it was for a pilot, and it was for a series regular role. So it was a nice role.
yeah.
And an hour before the audition came, she called me up and she said, I can't do the audition. And hung right up. Didn't even like And then I never heard from her again. And I'm
Ah,
wondering,
yeah.
was that fear? Was that, that this was something real, this was real? Um, and maybe it was just too much. So it really bogged me out because this was somebody who was really gung ho for months. I was working with her, and she had little auditions here and there. She was going to them. She was really gung ho, and then I got this big one. She seemed really excited about it, and an hour beforehand, and, yeah, I'm not going, and it was just very abrupt. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
this is really odd. So and I tell that story because I couldn't figure out at that time why.
Yeah.
Because most actors would have killed for that audition.
Yeah. Well, you worked all worked so hard to get this audition. You get it. You're like, look, I got you what you want, and then
And it's, no, I don't want to do it.
it's like, but
And
it's not even an excuse. Just I can't do it, and that's it. So it's you know, yeah,
and that's when I realized we have a problem, on our hands here.
yeah,
And I don't at that time I mean I'm still learning. I think one of the things I hypothesize is fear.
mm,
Fear of change really. Because when you get that big role or that large role, your life is going to change drastically sometimes.
yeah.
And
Do do you
there's a
think
whole host of changes. Mhm.
do you think it's kind of a little bit of like putting the cart before the horse, like the fear of the change and just worrying about something that hasn't happened yet, instead of like just being like, here's the moment, I'm going to go into this audition and let's see what happens. Instead they're thinking about, well, if I get this, I'm going to be this, and then I got to do this, and then this and that,
Yeah.
yeah,
That could be part of you. Yeah, I would rather hope that somebody would be like, okay, well, worry about that later. But, a lot of times this fear is subconscious, meaning that, you don't even know what's happening there. So this could be something like you don't feel good now all of a
yeah,
sudden before the audition, or something comes up, or you deliberately do something that makes you late or not, or
mm,
miss the audition, or you start arguing with yourself against like, oh, this isn't really worth my time, and
mm.
what's really going on is a fear deep down inside. And that's what I suspect I like I said I
Yeah, we
didn't
don't
get
know.
a chance. I don't know. I can't.
She didn't
I'm
give
not
you a
gonna sit.
chance to
Right, I'm not
even
gonna
do
sit.
it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that, oh, this is why she did that. I don't know.
Yeah,
Um, I could speculate, but I don't know.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, that would be definitely a change. It would be the different thing here is the fear of change, which leads to kind of like even fear of success because there's going to be now more obligations presented to you.
yeah. Was there something, because in this book, what I think is really special about your book is that you're talking about something that a lot of acting books don't really touch on, which is the mindset, the self-esteem of the actor, which is what I thought was really refreshing about reading your book. Is it's like it's not uh, do this, it's not do that. It's here's where you are mindset wise. Here's what you need to convey here,
Hmm.
inside. So when you walk in the room, it's not just this, put on thing that you can just like take off. Was there something that you wanted to convey in that book that you felt was missing in though in those acting books? Is that kind
Oh,
of
that was pretty much the impetus or the driving force behind me writing the book was because no one's talking about this,
yeah,
and a lot of times these acting trainings are all about turning out actors, but not dealing with the mind, working on the mindset of it. And that's why like a lot of these schools, what I've noticed is a high turnover rate, high burnout rate from one of these
mm,
conservatory graduates. They'll spend 4 years on a degree, or 3 years on an MFA degree, spend a lot of money, and then after a few years they're out. They're out of business doing something else.
do you think that's a problem in that they're not addressing that?
I think that's part of it.
Mhm.
That they're not going with the realistic what it's going to mentally take to be an actor. What it's mentally going to take to be in an industry that is tough and has a lot of moving parts at all times.
Yeah. Yeah, because when I went to conservatory, I went to the neighborhood playhouse. I went to Strasbourg, and yeah, they don't really talk. You don't really when you actually get into the business, it's completely different from what you're being taught.
Right.
Is is that just is there a way to make that adaptation more smooth, or is it just kind of two different trains of thought coming at you?
Um, I mean, it could be two different trains of thought, and I think even both. I think you can by incorporating classes like this in the school, and giving more of a realistic picture, and then this way, in case it would be better sometimes to spend 1 or 2 semesters rather than spending 4 years to realize this is something you may not want to do.
Yeah,
So think, but I think it could also be exciting. I don't want to discourage it, but at the same time, I also think it's important to be realistic. And just because you graduate from conservatory doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be on Broadway next year, or that you're going to
exactly.
be, on a series as a series regular. It's still going to take years. And that's
Yeah,
why sometimes, the reality is most working actors need at least a 10 or 20-year plan, you know, at least.
yeah,
That is that, and I've had conversation with graduates who are frustrated. They're telling me, I've been out of school for 2 years. Why haven't I made it? And I would say to them, I was like, look, you've only been out of school for 2 years.
yeah. That I think that is that the danger of the dream that they're trying to sell you at the conservatory is this idea of like, or is that something that came out of their head and not something necessarily that the conservatory is putting in their head? That they're like, oh, I'm going to go to conservatory and I'm going to come out and, in 1 year I'll be here and then in another year I'll be here.
Yeah, well, because there are some rare success stories that
Of
do this
course.
happen, and that can happen, but it's very rare.
Yeah.
Where okay, you graduate, and then a year later you're headlining on Broadway, or you're a series regular in a Netflix series or an NBC series.
Yeah.
That does happen, but it's very very rare,
They
and
they
it
all
just
they all told us about like Miles Teller when he was pulled out of Strasbourg to go do the rabbit hole or whatever with Nicole Kidman or whatever, and it's like those are the exceptions or whatever. I'm sorry,
yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but I just wanted to put that in there.
No, it's absolutely correct though. There are exceptions. They
Yeah,
are. And, while I think it's great to highlight that, I also feel it may be a bit misleading, if you
yeah.
sit there and say that this can happen. But at the same time, what if it doesn't happen? What's your next plan? And that
That,
would be how hard are you going to work? Because
yeah.
that's kind of the only way to really succeed in this business. You've got to work hard, very hard.
One of the things that I wish, I mean, they touched on it in school, but like I think the most important thing an actor needs to learn is relaxation under pressure.
Oh
Because if
yeah.
you can have that, then the creativity will come out. If you come in all stressed out in the room, it's going to block you. It's going to make it
Hey,
harder for you
hey,
to cry, is to move through emotions.
of course, if you're blocked, it's definitely gonna be a problem, and it's gonna come out in other ways.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not even gonna really know it, but I think a lot of it is coming from being not relaxed in the room and not knowing how to do that. That's why in the book, you talk a lot about meditation. That was if I could ever do anything over again, I would have gotten meditation sooner because that was a game changer for me because it just
Hmm.
was able to teach you that, okay, that happened, but it's not the end of the world. You might, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, one of the things with NLP, one of those truths of NLP is that there's no such thing as failure, only feedback.
exactly.
So, you know, even if you make a mistake or flub a line, keep
That's
going,
yeah,
and it's feedback for you,
yeah,
and that means the next time you'll do even better now because you have
yeah.
that feedback.
I think one of the mistakes a lot of actors do is they'll be like, "Can I start over?" And it's like, if you just kept going to the end, you might have been able to do that. I remember I did something for a casting director, and he it wasn't going well, but at the end, I was able to win him back.
Hmm.
Because I stuck with it. I didn't just go, "Oh, this is not working out. Let's stop it." Because you're not going to do that on set. You're not going to be
No,
able to do
and
that in a Broadway play.
of course not. You got to keep going,
Yeah,
and if you keep going, a lot of times the audience would not even know that you flubbed the line
yeah,
because they, unless they read the play, verbatim. Other than that, it's
yeah,
gonna they're not gonna know it, and just keep going. And I think that's where actors start beating themselves up in the head. Is when they make these mistakes, they're very hard on themselves.
yeah. And it's hard because it's in that subconscious. It's not
Hmm.
like something that they're necessarily aware of. They
Of
just are.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
and a lot of that stuff they're taking in, baggage from the subconscious.
yeah. And New York is, especially if you're in New York or one of the big cities, you're surrounded by a bunch of different people. So, if you're
Hmm.
empathetic and you're in this vulnerable position, all these things are gonna come out of you. And that's why I think it's very important to have like meditation, because that's a place to go when you don't feel good. It's like, I can go here, and
Hmm.
this will be there. And what you'll find over time with meditation, is it'll show up in your life when you don't even know it. Like you'll be like, all of a sudden you'll be really mad, but you'll be like, you know what, that wasn't that big deal, and you'll be able to
Yeah,
calm down. So it's
of
like this.
course.
So it's like this thing that you not necessarily like. I feel like meditation gets this bad rap where it's like we're gonna be bliss bunnies all day, and it's like, no, it's about you've got it's about coming back to that neutral.
Hmm. Yeah, to be totally neutral on that.
Yeah. The the other thing I think that's important for actors to learn is vision, is to have a
Yeah,
vision of where you want to go. If you can be relaxed and yes.
yeah. Vision, know your type, know your brand.
Yeah.
And that's why I think a lot of actors make mistakes because usually the first thing I ask in any meeting is what are your goals? What do you want to do? And some things will be I want to work with this director, that director, these type of projects. I think those are going to be more likely to lean to success versus those. Hey, I'll take anything.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's great to want to take anything, but
Yeah.
you know, specialize in something. Really
Yeah.
focus on that. Two or three types that you really can
Yeah.
embody and really take advantage of those, and then
Yeah.
what else can happen may other stuff may happen organically, but knowing your vision and knowing your type I
Yeah.
think is another predictor of success, and I wish schools taught that too, more of the
Yeah.
business aspect.
Yeah. That's a thing that I found is missing, is they don't a lot of also you find a lot of acting teachers who have a bad perception of the business, and they will
Uh-huh.
bring that onto the. I had that with an acting coach, and he was great and everything, but it was like I would bring him sides, and he'd be like just ripping them apart, and I'm like, I got to go in here and not think about that this isn't good, and like he's just tearing it apart. It's so
Yeah. Well, I don't want to say I don't necessarily believe it, but there's usually a lot of people will say, those who can't, can't do, those who can do,
yeah,
those who can't teach. And, I mean, there are some some acting teachers that are fabulous working actors,
yes,
in right now. But there's also a few that never been on set, and
yeah,
when I see them key teaching actors, I'm like, interesting,
yeah. You see that.
but, so they're living through the dreams, and they're trying to, um, or they're bitter, when they by the time they get into the classroom.
Yeah, but I feel like they're pushing that onto the actors, and that's another subconscious thing. It took me a while to kind of figure it out. It was like, wait a minute, this is not good for me to be having this idea. I want to be in the business, and he's slowly making me, just, it's that you talk about it in the book, finding a group of people who you can work with. You also talked about this in some of your interviews that you've done on other podcasts, of finding that group of people that, that lift you up, or finding somebody who's even, where you want to be, like a
Yes.
mentor.
Yeah, and I always say hang out with more successful actors than you are right now at that moment because it'll build you up. It'll force you to, build your skill set up and step up your game. Just like on the other hand, and this has been I wasn't the only one said this, that hundreds of people said this. If you hang out with people that are negative, it's also gonna drop you down and hold you back tremendously.
Yeah.
And this has been backed up by a lot of research, so it's not just a guess here that actually does happen. So having a good tribe is important. Though, and the more successful people will hold you accountable, and they're not going to be threatened by successful people are not going to be threatened by your success.
Yeah.
They're going to be championing it too. The people that are threatened by your success are those that are that are not doing
Yeah.
well.
Scary thing is, though, I found people that, were, and they actually have, that they were threatened by success, and it was in between. So that's what I wanted to talk about is, welcome to the DMF. I'm Justin Younts. This is part 3. You talk about finding that, how should actors go about finding people that are in that realm where they want to be? Because what I see is, you have actors can actually have one-on-one, you have a lot of groups, but sometimes I feel like it's the same level of actors, meaning the same
Yeah,
level of actors, and they just all kind of, not always, but a lot of them will just gripe about the business, but I should have been
yeah.
here, but I should have, and it's like,
Or
that's the
they
worst
complain
thing to
about
do.
or while they're wait I think the most hilarious example of that is people will be complaining about the guests that they're in a waiting room waiting for, which
Yeah,
is something I can't understand. And also, the reason why you should never complain is you never know who's going to hear you.
exactly.
Um, One of my clients told me that they were in a waiting room for Warner SVU. They were waiting for the producer sessions before, COVID, before the
Yeah.
pandemic. And these other two actresses that I guess were auditioning for the same role were going back and forth complaining how much they didn't like SVU. You know, the the only thing they didn't realize that the person sitting to the left of them was the executive producer and showrunner of the series. So, and then when they turned
Oh.
around, they introduced him, said, "Hi, are you an actor?" And the showrunner just said, exactly. He goes, "No, I produce a show you guys don't like." And all I said to myself was like, "Well, they're not getting, you know, called back in
Wow.
again." But that. I don't know why you would possess you would do that. Even
Especially
if
in
you,
that environment. You
well, not
know,
only that, it's like it's
yeah,
business. Even if you don't necessarily like a show or like it's a business. It's a job. Take it. Your job is
yeah,
to tell that story. Put those feelings aside. And again, you never know who's there, who's going to be there, and
exactly. I mean, if they had the opposite of that, and had came in with a good attitude and stuff, maybe that guy say, I don't think you're right for this part or something, but let's see what we can maybe, you never
yeah.
know,
Or I'm going to be call. I'm going to make sure they're going to be on the list to keep calling back in
Yeah,
over and over again, and that's success. Now, going back to what you said before, I think there's other ways. Yeah, Actors Connection one-on-one can tend to, while they're valuable,
yeah,
places to go, and I recommend my clients to do those, workshops with casting directors. But the only thing that, again, is the complaining all the time. That can happen, and that's not going to help. That's all it's going
yeah,
to do is make you more depressed and even self-sabotage. By the time you get to that room, you're already in a
yeah,
deflated mindset. So your auditions may even be suffering, or whatever scene you're presenting, the quality is going to be go a little bit downhill.
yeah,
What I would suggest doing: get involved in theater groups, get involved in uh, playwright groups, play reading groups. script reading groups,
Mm,
film festivals. You know,
yeah,
um, get involved with those types of things.
yeah,
And then this way you meet all different types of people.
yeah. That's a good way for actors to meet people is through going to film festivals, going to things like that, and getting involved, like you said. Getting back to your book, you you put it down into like four parts: self-esteem, self-efficacy, personality, and the big traits, and fear of success. Is there um, is there a way, a reason why you wanted to go in that realm? Is that
Well, that was, like I said, that was based on my doctoral dissertation
mm,
because I measured four things against self-defeating behavior, and that was self-esteem, self-efficacy, personality, which is like the big five factor model of personality, and fear of success.
yeah.
So that's why I kind of went in that order of the book.
Okay. Okay. One of the things that I really like was the five models, the five model, the openness,
Hmm.
conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. I found, you know, look at like I knew those words, but by looking into them, I didn't know exactly what they necessarily all meant. And I, look, especially like conscientiousness and neuroticism. You know, neuroticism can sometimes be associated with, a negative thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean, a negative thing.
No, it just means that you're more reactive and more responsive. And there is a value of that at times because, there are times where you need to be vigilant. Um, hundreds of years ago when we were in a hunter gathering days, you sort of had to be vigilant
Yeah.
because you could have could have gotten killed.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I mean, I don't think there's always anything always negative about, highly negative about neuroticism. Although, it can be depending on if it's a high, if it's you're high in that, it can affect your productivity and your effectiveness and whatever it is you set out to do because it's when it's paired with low conscientiousness and high neuroticism, that is the link between self-sabotage.
Is there um is there a reason why you went with this model?
Well, when I like not to kind of geek out, but when I did my research, I did surveys and I did correlations, relationships between that, and that was the most statistically significant one was the correlation between high neuroticism and low conscientiousness. And so that was like, this makes sense now.
Is there because one of the things, I mean, this is kind of a nitpick of here. You talked about the dark triad, and for those that don't know about the dark triad, it's narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy. I always knew it as the Machiavellianism as sociopathy. Is that something that's changed?
Um, well, it's definitely a strong characteristic of sociopaths,
Yeah.
but it could also be just a strong business sense and strategic mindset. That's what really Machiavellian is. Just being very strategic and ultra strategic. Again, it's how the context and how you use it. Now, if you use it to destroy people, destruct or put people down, then it can be considered evil and nefarious. But if you use that strategic way to
Yeah.
overcome things, that can be a good trait to have. You know.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, Getting back to one of the things you also talked about was procrastination with actors.
Hmm.
Do actors just not view the art in the same way as a musician or an athlete?
Uh, Possibly. I'm not entirely sure, but I do know that usually with I know with acting, like I said, there's a lot of emotional layers. With athletes, you're just performing, a game, playing
Mhm.
a sport, and that's it. Where it was an actor, you're portraying different characters, and you're pouring your heart and soul. A lot of times, being extra vulnerable. So that's gonna, after time, gonna take its toll on
Yeah,
anyone.
but like a musician, an artist, all of them seem to understand that, you really kind of got to practice every day. And it seems to, it's very rare when I see an actor who I ask is like, what is your, daily, path? What do you do? Like for me, it's, doing consonants, tongue twisters, memorizing something. I think
Yeah,
memorization is one of the most important things an actor can learn because you don't know how much time you're going to have with the material.
of course. And not only that, but just learning dialect. You can spend time learning dialects. Because even when we were going through COVID and during the strike, there was a lot of downtime.
Yeah.
So I was always like kind of on top of my clients. Okay, this may be a time where you can start really practicing, um, with new scenes and go in front of a mirror or even tape yourself on your phone. You don't have to share with anybody, but just practice, keep practicing because if you don't use anything you don't use, you're going to lose, and that happens whether it's physical or mentally. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it,
Yeah.
and so that's where I think, okay, practice every day. I mean, Michael Jordan, 5,000 a day would oftentimes shoot hoops for 7 days a week, even the days he was off season.
Yeah.
He made sure every day he did 5,000 shot 5,000 hoops because he didn't want to lose it, his
Yeah.
notoriety.
Did you find a lot of your clients were receptive to that, or was it the opposite? Or was it a mix?
Almost, I would say it's a mix.
Mm.
Um, part of one of another trait I talk about is agreeableness, which is, you have to be coachable if you're going to be working actor, which not only just means from an acting coach perspective, but even from a director standpoint. Because whether you're working on stage or film or TV, the director's vision
Yeah.
is takes precedence. So I think sometimes some actors aren't open to that.
Do you think that that's something you've seen increase with time, or is that decrease, or is it just stayed the same?
I think it maybe decreased a little bit.
Okay.
But sometimes I would meet actors and they would tell me, because I'd be like, "Where are you training at?" And then the response is, "Well, I don't need any training. I had all the training I need." And I'm like, in my head, like that's not possible.
Yeah.
Because I think they might have thought that I meant that was as like, oh, you're not skilled enough that you need training. But my point is that every actor, no matter how skilled you are, needs to be constantly in class or working with coaches, because that skill set has to be sharp. And that's what I said, even during a pandemic, even under a strike, this is no excuse now to sit back.
We have Zoom.
uh
We have this,
we have Zoom, we have get on Zoom with each other, read scenes,
Yeah.
self tape, get feedback to each other, and then just keep doing it and doing it and doing it because, you know, regardless of any closure or any slowdown, there's always going to be a returning point, and you need to be ready for that turning point when things come back.
Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.
Things come back.
What do you think are some exercises that actors could do that could lead them to, would you say this is more into the conscientious category,
Hmm.
to being more conscientious about that? Is that,
Well, I set time in a calendar, like, set a timeout and saying this is a time of day, and could give or take. A time doesn't have to be, but put it down in writing because research has also shown when you put something in writing like that, it's real. So
yeah,
put it in your calendar and say, okay, for this time for an hour, I'm going to rehearse this scene today. Every day, you choose a time, and write it down and commit to it
yeah,
and hold, and form that circle, that success circle, the accountability circle, who can then say, each other can check in and say, "Hey, did you run your lines today?" Or let's all meet at Zoom at 4 o'clock and do like a work, station or workshop where we read, scenes and we, offer
yeah.
feedback to each other. Those are things, daily habits you can do. Um, you know, don't waste time on productive things. Now, social media is great, but some actors get so caught up in social media voicing, political stuff, moral stuff,
Yeah.
and I think it's important. Okay, you want to be active, you want to have an activist voice, great. But sometimes I'll see actors that will write like pages of posts on social media, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm not
Yeah.
everyone. You're entitled to your opinion. However, why are you should be
Yeah.
rehearsing too. You should be
Exactly.
studying. You should be studying right now, um, and not focusing your energy here.
And you
Um,
and you could have the same situation that happened with that guy in the waiting room. Somebody sees that and goes, "Oh, that's how you feel about that." Well, I
well,
think this is
and that's why I make the point. I'm like, look, it doesn't matter what side anybody's on any political or religious or spiritual persuasion. When you're negative like that,
yeah,
regardless of who it is, it's not
yeah,
going to look good. Even if we share the same
yeah,
feelings about said
yeah,
person, if you post all about that all the time, it's
yeah,
gonna. I'm not gonna want to rep you, and no one's gonna
yeah.
want to bring you on set because we're gonna be worried that.
You're gonna, go into, a religious or a political tirade, and everyone's gonna be like, "Well, okay,
Yeah,
how are we supposed to work together?"
yeah, and that's also another thing I think that needs to be taught is like, talent is great, but also one of the biggest predictors of success as an actor is being very good on set,
Yep.
being someone that everyone loves to work with, being
Yeah.
gracious, being professional, following directions, being on
Yeah.
time, and, not arguing, with the director or the producer.
Yeah.
Again, even if you personally disagree,
Yeah.
it's their project. It's
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
thing, that your role is to fulfill that their vision. Yes, there may be times where they may say, what do you think?
Yeah.
And then you could say it in a suggestive way. But, another thing that I've seen with successful clients are those that everyone loves working with.
Yeah. You want to be able to work with everybody, and not
Hmm.
just a few. Um, I think with social media, if you want to keep it more private, like if you're just messaging friends or something like
Yeah,
that,
I mean,
that's one way.
sending DMs is one thing. You want to talk about this, but posting it,
Yeah.
even or I would say, if you really are that active, committed to that, then you should create a personal account
Yeah.
that and block it so that nobody can see that
Yeah.
except people that are within that circle, and then have an acting account, you as an actor, which
Yeah.
should have nothing about those types of posts.
Yeah.
Um, that would be my suggestion. But again, don't put too much of your energy into that. And
Yeah.
I was talking about another podcast earlier, was that I think that also has other issues going on in the actor's personal life.
Mm.
That's kind of causing them to go on rants like that, even though it's targeted towards some, specifically.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times it could be previous trauma that's coming up that's really causing
Yeah.
someone to get that emotional and that upset.
And then the tendency to post it so that everyone can see this tirade. We all have our moments, but I don't think we need to post it so the whole
No,
world can see it. And I think that's the problem.
yeah, I mean, even if I go on like if I have a bad day with a client or the agency, I may get peed off, but you're not gonna see me putting a rant on social media about it because
Yeah.
A, it's a waste of my time.
Yeah.
It's not gonna do anything, and B, it's gonna look like, okay, this guy's bitter. Why would
Yeah.
I want to work with an agent that's bitter, or what? And the same thing with an actor. So again, so you got to be careful with social media and don't waste too much time on social media because
Yeah.
there's the idea of doom scrolling where you'll sit there for hours sometimes, not even realizing it's hours that you could have used to be studying.
Yeah.
You could have used that to be working on stuff, submitting yourself,
Yeah.
networking.
Yeah, I mean, that I think that's the danger of social media, is getting stuck in that, the doom scroll, and you eventually just have to say, "Listen, I've spent enough time on this. I need to, if you want to do a little bit of that, get off on
Yeah.
that, but use it productively to, to find somebody or post something that, is important. But I don't know. See, that's the thing with social media. It seems like it's a catch 22.
It
The
really is, because we it's there's a lot of great things about it.
yeah,
But at the same time, it can also be not so good, depending
yeah,
on how well you spend time on it. Even for younger people, there was, a large study done in 2019 that demonstrated that the amount of hours spent on Instagram equaled more depression, especially in teenagers. So,
yeah.
while we think we're being connected, we're actually not. And it's isolating us even more and more by, focusing so much on social media.
And I think the comparison is the thing that starts to really happen. It's this comparison of I'm
Hmm.
like this, I'm like that, I want to be this. And I think people get, frustrated, with that. Get back to directing actors. When you are like working with them, just maybe you've got to coach them in a scene or something, or you're working. How do you like to work with actors?
Well, I mean, I'm not an acting teacher, so I make that very clear that they should go for an acting coach, who's someone who is trained to do that. But I will sometimes get feedback and general feedback on a self tape. But
Yeah,
generally, I look for authenticity. That's my, like, thing that I've found working. Bookable actors do is that they're authentic. It doesn't seem like they're acting at all.
yeah,
And so, a lot of times I might tell people to dial it down a bit, especially if they've been trained on stage and theater.
yeah, yeah,
They going from theater on camera is a totally different thing. And sometimes a lot of theater actors like to be very big and expressive,
yeah.
which works, if you're projecting on a, 100 to 150 seat theater. It doesn't work at all when you're on, in, intimate setting like a camera.
Robin Williams said that he had to learn that. He said when he was doing, Mick, Mork and Mindy and stuff, it was still on a stage and everything. So when he got to like doing films, he had to like really be more subtle and realize that like every little thing is going to be picked up. So it's like you don't need to do much.
Yeah, yeah, it's less is more, and that's hard for a lot of actors too.
Yeah,
Is just to kind of be really do everything less, and just keep things as a less is more. I mean, if you look at even like Law and Order, how a lot of the actors, it's very monotone, flat,
yeah,
and that's how it should be done. I mean, not everything, but that would be an example of
yeah,
you know keeping it to a minimalist normal tone.
yeah,
How would you say this line to somebody on the street or to your friend?
yeah,
Rather than going all full on theatrical, just try that. So things like that. And sometimes I would recommend, okay, you should go get a coach, especially if it's a big audition.
yeah,
You should not be trying, and it's not a reflection of how well you are as an actor.
yeah,
If you've got a big audition, you definitely should be going
yeah.
to a coach.
Yeah, my acting coach is all about that. He's like, you got a big audition, you come to me, because it's not something you want to be messing around with.
No, and that's another thing too that what really kind of throws me off is like, let's say I get somebody, 8 pages of an audition due in 2 days, and then like 2 hours later, it's like I'm done. Wait, what? You know, and it was not that it was horrible, but it was like if you really took the time and worked with a coach, how much better would this be?
Yeah, yeah, and
How
you're
much
just
better of a
rushing it
performance?
in. Yeah, you're just like going, look, it's done. And it's like this is art. It's not 2 + 2 = 4. You got to spend some time on it. One of the things that when I have lines is I like to say it different inflections and in
Yeah,
different ways. I like to almost imagine what if there was a comma here instead of here, so that I'll
yeah,
say it differently.
and then just say what works for you. And then just say what works for you. And even going on the technique side, like I had a client who was reading one time for a horror movie, and
Mm,
the scene. where she was looking for somebody, she had to say the name 5 times, the person's
Mm,
name 5 times. And one of the variations we both kind of come up with, I'm like, those 5 times should be totally different.
yeah.
You should start off like maybe calm and then being frantic towards the end of that. Because that's that, and it's not necessarily written like that, but I think that's where training comes in, to start reading between the lines.
Yeah. What can you bring outside off the page? Like what are you
Ex-
bringing off the page?
yeah, and that's why I think a lot of sometimes even in my work, where a lot of times they may audition for a one liner in a TV show,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of actors are scared by that. And but I feel like a mistake a lot of actors make is they'll slate and then they'll go right into one line and leave. I'm like, where's the setup before and after that line?
Yeah.
There's a setup. Take a moment, take a pause.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
look what's going on in the scene, and then react. Because if this is not going to happen when it's filmed, there's going to be a setup and an exit point when you're
Yeah.
filming it. So that I think helps tremendously.
Yeah. Just well, yeah, having that preparation of between the two, as opposed to just showing up. Yeah, like you said, just like your dinner is ready. It's
Yeah,
like, and then leave walking out the door. Uh
yeah. I mean, and that would look if you did that on set, it would look so inauthentic.
exactly. Because it's going
You
to be
know,
based off of what the situation, because probably on set, he dropped a plate or whatever, and you're
yeah.
coming over there like,
You're gonna be walking slowly. You may be looking around. You might be
yeah,
doing other stuff beforehand, and that needs to be um, done. And again, it's some of the most powerful self tapes I've seen where it was very minimalist as
yeah,
far as the delivery, but it was just top notch.
yeah. It just felt like it was just coming out, and I think that's where the training comes in. It's like, can you say that one line as if you said it the first time a hundred times?
Yeah, and plan it out too, because
Yeah.
another example, I had a client who was worked a couple days on the blacklist, and
Mm,
was working alongside James Spader, and was very impressed
mm,
because. And now, if you watch the show, the way it looks like James Spader was just saying these lines off the cuff, but
yeah.
that wasn't very true behind the scenes. He had every line, every inflection point, every time he would like giggle, like if you put a giggle on the line, he always did that every take. Like at this beat, I'm gonna giggle,
Yeah.
and it looks so natural.
And that's
But
the
yet,
mastery, and that's the craft. And if you're
mhm.
not interested in doing the work to get to that point, then it's like, why do you want to be an actor? Because it's like,
Yeah,
this
well,
is the board.
I think a lot of times it's a prestige, or it's a fallacy, because the good actors make it look very easy,
Yes.
and it's anything but that.
No, it's always.
It's anything but that. And I think that's also not necessarily taught that much.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think that's a major setback for a lot of actors, is that these schools are not preparing them. One of the things that and I'll tell the backstory about this, is to be committed to why you become an actor. That's the first thing. Most actors will say they want to tell stories, they want to move the audience, they want to inspire, they want to create. And so operate from the source of creation,
Mm,
as an actor, and operate from that perspective every day. And then always remember why you became an actor. And that's to tell a story, and to, help inspire other people. So anytime that you get a good experience, a good review, whether it's good feedback from a casting director, whether it's good feedback from a coach, whether it's an audience member, if you're in a show that says, "Hey, I loved your show. It inspired me." Document that. And I also think with the happy file should actually be a hard copy file, like a journal, one
yeah.
of those old fashioned journals, and just write it down. And every time something happens good, write it down, even if it seems small, there's no such thing as a small good thing. It's a good thing is a good thing. So write it down, and then I call that your happy file, so that when you
Mm,
have some self-doubt that comes in, pull out your happy file.
great.
And that will help you remain connected and committed to why you're doing what you're doing. And now, because there's going to be ebbs and flows. Even the best working, most prolific working actors, there's going to be a time when there's not going to be work happening for a while.
Yeah.
I know people, people who had like, 3 series regulars back to back, and now are working still, bartending. So just, to help pay the bills.
Yeah.
So there's going to be downtime, and there's going to be time when self doubt can kick in. But just stay true to your happy file and look at your happy file, and that's the purpose of that is to keep you focused.
Yeah. And I would add to that, don't be married to just this. You need to have other things going on.
Work life balance is extremely important, not just in any this is profession, but any profession. So you shouldn't be consumed with acting 24/7. Have hobbies, have passions, have causes that you do. And a lot of actors I know do volunteer work. A lot of
Yeah.
actors I know have other side businesses.
Yeah.
They're fitness instructors, yoga instructors, realtors, or catering. They do other stuff that fulfills them, or
Yeah.
they teach children. So do something that fulfills you, not just acting 24/7.
Exactly. Do you have a beginning of the day routine?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you should always do is, I think, set your intentions for the day. What do you plan on doing today? And you may not get to everything, because things can sidetrack easily, but having some sort of plan or compass for the day, like today I'm going to do this, or today I'm going to work on this,
Yeah.
and you set that intention. Also, a couple other things that I think are important is visualization. So this is kind of like where, hypnosis and NLP technique that everybody's done, even though you may not have looked at it as that. But you visualize yourself before the audition, or before the performance, or even before the class, if you're taking an acting class, where you're doing that scene and performing that scene. And not just performing, but go through the entire scene in your head over and over again. And almost like put it in a perspective of you're watching yourself in a movie theater. Like you're sitting in a movie theater watching yourself on screen, doing the scene over and over again. And you go through the entire scene in your head. Um,
Mm.
the brain does not know the difference between reality and imagination. So by doing this, you're rewinding to your brain that you're already going to give a strong performance.
Yeah.
And affirmations are important too. Like I believe. I mean, some people may disagree, but I do think affirmations are helpful. As long as you believe the affirmation, not just saying them. If you're just going to say it to say it, it's not going to do you any good. But I deserve to be here. I deserve success. And watch the language of how you describe yourself. So I always tell actors, do not say the word I'm an aspiring actor, or I'm a starving artist. Because when
Yeah.
you say those words, you're creating the subconscious reality
Yeah.
of that happening. And the idea here is you're a professional working actor. If you've been through any training, or if you've worked one stage that they require tickets for admission to, you're a professional working actor.
Yeah.
And that's how you should be referring to yourself as, to your internal self-talk and external.
Do you have a nighttime routine?
Same thing, kind of just planning for the next day, and then just any affirmations is saying to yourself, every day I'm getting better and better in every way.
Mm.
And again, just visualizing for the day. Um, be careful also, again, about the company you keep. Unfortunately, sometimes it could be family who might not have the best, they may think they're protecting you, but they're,
Yeah.
not. So I would say maybe, you know, start to distance yourself if you notice like some negative family members. You may not be able to avoid them, but completely, but put it aside from them in your brain, mind, that this opinion is just their opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's good advice, because the family can, it's not always in front. Sometimes it's subtle and it's something that you don't
Yeah, now,
recognize.
it's interesting because there's a lot of times passive aggressive compliments or compliments, like a compliment stage is an insult. Like one of my clients, was on a series in LA, um, that she got through our LA agent, and one of her acting friends said, I was really impressed with your performance. I was so impressed you didn't mess up once. And I remember when my client and I were laughing because I was like, she's like, how am I supposed to take that?
Yeah.
Even though it was just as a compliment, like that was like,
Yeah.
whoa, what did you expect me to do, Matt? So be careful. Those sometimes compliments can be loaded. Like it's like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. It's like, you look great today. I never thought you came in. I never thought you could dress like that, something
yeah,
like that. It's like, it's like, oh,
yeah,
it's nice. It's that plausible deniability of, I'm saying something nice, but there's the
I'm really
insidious part.
saying, yeah, 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 and that will affect even I can assure you that even if you miss it consciously, your subconscious is not going to miss that, and
Yeah.
you can hear that loud and clear.
Yeah. Because the subconscious takes all of that. And
Yeah.
since it's unknown, you're gonna, well, what does he mean by that? And that's why it's like, that's why, once again, getting back to meditation, I would ask you, so do you meditate? Like, what is
Uh,
your thing?
y- yes, I do.
Okay.
Um, you know, I definitely do that. I definitely consider that to some level. I do meditate. I do believe in affirmations. So, I think it helps me keep calm, if anything. Um, I'm not necessarily a big one on the law of attraction or manifestation so much because I do believe that, when I say manifestation, I think it's good for hard work
Yeah.
in a sense. Like, that's where I think, like, where, standard law of attraction, I think is great, but it's missing the piece of hard work that comes with that. Because I can tell you right now, I'm manifesting $1 million, but $1 million is not going to come to me if I'm sitting on my, rear end
Yeah.
manifesting $1 million. I have to work hard for that,
Yeah.
and you know, I mean, that's an extreme example, but I'm just showing that.
Yeah.
So I think, meditation is important. I think just keeping calm is good.
What about the, there's the law of assumption. And I think that's more of the important thing, because that's basically who you are, is kind of what you'll be. So, like, if you just sit there and say, yeah, I'm going to manifest $1 million, but your subconscious is still believing, like, well, no, you're not. It's like, what you want to happen is the subconscious to assume that, and then you
Hmm.
can do that. And that will lead to hard work, because if you truly
Yeah.
believe you are this, then you're going to want to work harder. You're going to want to this idea that, this is going to come to me, and now I'm going to just, be lazy or all day, is like, that's not how this works. Once something like that is gifted to you, whether it be $1 million, whether, whatever it is, it's going to change your perception, and you're going to work harder, because that's what you needed
Hmm.
to get it, you know.
Yes.
Do you what do you do for physical fitness?
Well, I think for that, walking.
Mm, okay.
Walking is important.
Yes.
I do a little bit of Taibo, which is,
Oh, cool. Yeah.
on tape. But for me, walking, and I think walking even helps me cognitively, not just, physically fit, energetic wise. Like sometimes I'll even listening to a podcast while I'm walking, and I
Yeah.
find that I absorb the information
Yeah.
better than I would if I just sat listening to it. At night if I'm walking a movement. So I think that's a good thing too. Um, and that helps break up the day too. It's because again, when you're sedentary, you start to then having negative self talk can come in, and that can start to derail you.
What are you reading?
Right now, I'm reading some books on NLP.
Oh, cool. Do you
You
mind
know,
sharing some of them?
one of them I'm reading right now is called NLP for Rookies.
Ooh.
And it's by, I'm just pulling it up here. Um, Kind of show it a bit. NLP for Rookies.
Oh, cool.
By, from rookie to expert. I again, I'm not saying you're going to be an expert, but it's
Yeah.
good. It's good to keep learning. So I keep reading. I have a lot of I read a lot of Tim Ferriss's books. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a Tribe of Mentors that he wrote. The Four
Great
Hour
book.
Work Week. Um, I read. Another book that is a bit of a controversial author, but I like him is Jordan Peterson, The 12
Yeah.
Rules for Life. I thought that
Yeah.
was a great book.
Yeah, those
Um,
are good books. I mean, he's kind of he's another catch 22. It's like there's a lot I like, and then there's a lot where it's like,
well, yeah, I mean, he did get a little, but he's also a very brilliant man,
yeah,
and has a lot of great stuff that I think everybody can listen to. And, even if you put some of the other stuff aside, if you
agreed.
look at some of the information on psychology and stuff, it can really help you out.
Yeah.
So, like him, I listen to a lot of his stuff, occasionally when um, I want to, what else I'm working on a couple other things too now.
Oh,
So I like to read, I'm big on podcasts. Like, one of the podcasts I listen to now is Diary of a CEO,
yeah.
which is, you know, um, really good. They have all different types of interviews on mindset, on fitness, on business, health. So, uh, I've also listened to a lot of Tony Robbins stuff.
Yeah, he's
So,
great.
yeah. So, I'm one of the things that I always hammer home with all of this is that we're always learning, and we're always have to be from a place of learning. And that's why I don't work with people who say I have all the training I need.
Yeah, that's
As an actor.
foolish.
No, no, it's not. And even that's what I say. I have a PhD in psychology. I'm still learning every day.
If you have that mindset of I'm always learning, you're always going to learn. If you just sit there and say I've learned all I can, then guess what? Like you said, you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
Of course, and that's a lot of people lose skills that they don't
Yeah.
necessarily remember and all that. So,
What are you listening to?
well, like I said, I listen to music. I like eclectic. I mean, I'm very an
Oh,
eclectic type person. I'm a child of the '80s, so I'm aging myself, but I like '80s, '90s.
cool.
Um, you know, I or I listen to a little light rock, sometimes a little bit of country, not much, but so a lot of different stuff, that I like to keep myself. I like to just keep myself, with different interests in that.
I like that. What are you watching right now?
Watching, I watch a lot of the stuff that films in New York,
Mm,
Law and Order. Um, I watched, Netflix, like The Night Agent, which I like.
mm.
Black Mirror, I like that. Um, I like to try new things, out too. Especially, like if it's filming in New York, I like to give it a shot, and I'm kind of rooting for that. So,
Yeah. How can people reach you?
okay, so a couple of you can go to my agency website, bramanteartist.com, and if you're looking for representation, you can always submit through that website. Um, we have a form that you can fill out, and you can send all your links, your Actors Access Casting Networks links. Um, if you're looking, I'm also on Instagram. I'm both Bramante Artist and Dr. Al Bramante. Feel free to reach out and follow me. And if you want to, yeah, DM, I'm very open to that. You have any questions, I'll be
Excellent.
happy to, answer them. And, or if you have any comments or about this podcast or anything that.
Do how can people get your book?
So you can go on Amazon. It's called Rise Above the Script, and it's available in both paperback, well, three formats: paperback, Kindle, and audiobook.
Excellent.
So I kind of hit like all the different learning styles in a sense with that
Yeah.
one.
Well, for me, the Kindle is my favorite because I'm on the go. I need that, I want to read.
When you're on the train,
Yeah.
on the bus, on the bus,
Yeah.
or just outside. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I like all formats. I mean, I definitely I'm definitely more of a paperback, but I do certain appreciate Kindle more.
My problem is I've gotten to the point where I don't have any more room for books. So it's
Me
like,
too. Me too. That's why I started going on Kindle. I'm like, yep, okay. At least for Kindle, there's unlimited space.
like I
A
was
lot
going
more
through
space.
it. I'm like, okay, how can I get rid of some of these books? Because it's like I can get this on Kindle, but it's like, but I really like this book, so I know exactly what you
Yeah.
feel. Yeah. Um, well, thank you so much for doing this. This has been
Well,
great.
thank you, Justin, again for inviting me and welcoming me on.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Is there anything else you would like to say before we say goodnight?
Just keep living your dream, keep your passion up, because one of the and I'll end with this, and not to sound sour, but the regret is a powerful thing, and most of the research about regret is not the mistakes you made, it's the opportunities you didn't do.
Yeah.
You had the opportunity presented and you didn't take it.
Yeah.
So live your passion. If you want to act, go for it. You want to write, you want to travel the world, go for it.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you again.
Thank you. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.